Helen returned from the waves laughing, sunset gold on her skin, curls dripping seawater, without the ring. "My hand feels lighter," she said casually, wringing out her hair as David handed her a towel. "I think the tide took it." I didn't react, not yet. I looked at her hand. The finger that was meant to promise forever was bare. She wrapped herself in the towel and turned to the photographer. "It's fine, we'll just edit it in, right?" David chuckled like it was a joke. The photographer hesitated. "Do you remember when you last saw it?" I asked her. My voice was calm, too calm probably. Helen shrugged. "I think I had it on when we got here. Maybe I took it off when we sat down. Could have slipped into the sand." It wasn't panic in her voice, it was a performance, mild concern, as if she'd misplaced a pair of sunglasses, not something I had flown her parents in for, not something with both our names engraved inside. David leaned closer to her. "You did mention it was too tight, maybe it's better this way, huh?" She smirked, almost as if the whole thing amused her. "I guess this is the beach taking a stand." I turned my head toward the shoreline. The ocean stretched endlessly, swallowing secrets like it swallowed light. But rings don't just vanish. I walked over to where we had been sitting. Her purse was still there, so was her phone, unlocked. The screen was open to her camera roll. She hadn't posted anything yet. But there were 33 pictures, Helen in poses, Helen mid-spin, Helen holding hands with David for a fun shot, and in one of the earliest frames, the ring, still on her finger, glinting. I looked at the timestamp, 4:02 p.m. I looked at the next photo, 4:07 p.m. The ring was gone. I kept scrolling. 4:10. Helen laughed. David looked right at the camera. Her left hand on his chest. No ring. I stepped back. She didn't lose it. She removed it. Helen's voice rang from behind me. "Babe, you okay?" I turned. "Where exactly do you think it fell?" She hesitated. "I think near the big rock. I went to dip my feet." "You went alone?" "David came with me." "Of course he did." I didn't say anything more, just nodded, walked to the rental car, opened the glove compartment. 2 wedding bands sat in their velvet case, hers and mine. Hers, the twin of the one she lost. I took them both out, rolled the case between my fingers for a few seconds, and stepped outside. The wind had picked up. Seafoam kissed the air. The cliffside wasn't far. I stood at the edge, opened the box one last time. I thought about the months of planning, the calls with her mother, the countless adjustments to the venue, her dress fittings, the way she smiled every time I mentioned Margaret's name like it was a curse. Then I thought about the 5-minute gap between the photos. I let the wind take the rings, no ceremony, no witness, no more lies. When I returned to the beach, Helen was laughing with David again, now filming a reel. She didn't notice I was back until I walked past her, heading toward the parking lot. "Wait, where are you going?" she called out, following me in a half-run. "We still need to do the champagne shot." I didn't stop. I opened the car door. "Jason, it's just a ring, it doesn't mean anything." I finally faced her. "Exactly." She blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means, if a ring means nothing to you, then neither does a wedding." Her face stiffened. "You're being dramatic. You know how careless I can be." "Yeah," I said. "I do now." David approached behind her, shirt unbuttoned halfway like he belonged in her story. "Man, don't ruin the shoot over this." I smiled at him. "Don't worry, I'm not ruining anything. I'm just not finishing what was fake to begin with." He narrowed his eyes. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying Helen can keep playing bridge on Instagram, just don't tag me." Helen's face went pale. "Jason, wait, this is insane." I stepped into the car, shut the door, rolled the window down. "You didn't forget the ring, Helen, you gave it away." She opened her mouth, but no sound came. I looked at David. "You should try it on, might fit better than it did on her." Then I drove away. I wasn't the type to fall in love loudly. I observed, absorbed, and quietly attached. That's how Helen came into my life. She wasn't the girl I chased, she was the girl I watched from across the lecture hall, too proud to admit I memorized her coffee order before I ever said hello. We met at university, me, a business major with a quiet demeanor and precise notebooks, her, a media and design student who never once showed up to class without freshly curled hair and a phone angled toward her face. She wasn't the type you'd expect to fall for someone like me. She was too shiny, too loud, too visible. But maybe that's what drew me in. I didn't want to be seen, but I wanted to be with someone who always was. Helen wasn't manipulative in the beginning, she was just vibrant. When we finally spoke, it was because she needed help with a pitch deck. I said yes, and before I knew it, she was laughing at my playlists, reorganizing my workspace, and sleeping over more than. She stayed at her dorm. She said my apartment smelled like lavender and logic. I said she smelled like citrus and chaos. Somehow, it worked. We dated for 4 years. I proposed on our anniversary. She filmed it. Of course she did. 2 cameras, a hidden mic, even Margaret, my closest friend, was in on it. Margaret helped with the setup, the restaurant, the playlist. She even picked the florist. Margaret had been in my life since before Helen. We work together now. She was my operations lead, the person who knew when my calendar needed to breathe and when I'd been holding in emotions for too long. Helen didn't like her. Not because of anything Margaret did, but because she was there first. Margaret wasn't flashy. She wore muted tones, never posted on social media, and never once stepped over a boundary. But Helen sensed loyalty like a threat, and she was right, in a way. If anyone knew when Helen started drifting, it was Margaret. Don't you think it's strange she never talks about her own dating life? Helen once asked, mid-scroll, during dinner. She's private, I replied. Not everyone performs in their relationship. Helen rolled her eyes. That was a jab. I didn't argue, it would have gone nowhere. Then came David. He started off as a collaborator. He and Helen had worked on a short brand campaign together, and he introduced himself to me at a networking event as the guy making your fiancée go viral. I didn't like him the second I shook his hand. David had the look of someone who read just enough psychology to pretend he understood people. He smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. He wore brands that screamed money but claimed to be minimalist, and he always touched Helen when he spoke to her. Shoulder taps, low fives, casual lean-ins. All perfectly normal, all perfectly designed to be hard to call out. When I brought it up once, Helen snapped. He's gay, Jason. Why are you so insecure? I hadn't even been accused. I'd only asked if they needed to text that late. Margaret noticed too. She never said much, but once, while going through Helen's list of campaign invoices for tax deductions, she paused. David's name is on 4 of these, she said quietly. Is he consulting now? I looked at the screen. Apparently. She didn't push, just highlighted them and moved on. That was Margaret's way. She gave me information, never opinions. As the wedding approached, I started noticing things, little things. Helen was suddenly always busy, dress fittings I wasn't invited to, content shoots that ran too long, dinner plans postponed, cold replies when I texted, call me when you're done, and David was everywhere. He showed up to brunches I didn't know were happening. He picked her up when her car died, but wouldn't take mine. He attended meetings she claimed were confidential. I began to feel like a stand-in groom on my own stage. One night, I stayed late at the office, finalizing vendor payments. Margaret knocked on the glass door, holding 2 coffee cups. She knew I hated sweet lattes but brought me one anyway. I figured your hands needed something warm, she said, handing it over. She sat down and looked at me. Jason, she said gently. Are you happy? I didn't answer immediately. I looked down at the spreadsheet. I'm almost done. That's not what I asked. I sighed. Happiness isn't required, commitment is. Margaret smiled, but not kindly. That's the saddest sentence I've ever heard you say. I didn't reply, because deep down, I knew it was true. I was marrying Helen not because we were still in love, but because the story was already told. The posts had been made, the dress was chosen, the guest list was public. To back out now would make me the villain, and I was tired of being the villain in Helen's stories. Still, I tried, I adjusted, I tolerated David, I let her have the aesthetics while I managed the logistics. I watched the woman I once fell for become a version of herself tailored for followers. Then came the beach. It was supposed to be intimate, just us, David as the photographer, and a sunset Helen insisted was aesthetic gold. I went along with it because I still believed there was something left worth honoring. But when she returned without the ring, without apology, without effort, something snapped, not loudly, quietly, like the click of a door that's been closing for years but finally latches. That night, I sat on the hotel balcony alone. Helen was out with David, supposedly reviewing footage. Margaret messaged me a simple question. You okay? I responded, do you think people know when they're being replaced, or do they only realize when it's already done? She replied 2 minutes later. I think you've known for a while, you just didn't want to believe it. She was right. I stared at my phone screen for a long time before turning it off and going to bed. The ocean outside roared, but my thoughts were silent. Helen hadn't come back by morning. I knew then that I wasn't her partner, I was her placeholder. And the ring she forgot. That was her final rehearsal for walking away. But what she didn't know was, I was finally ready to exit too. Helen didn't come back to the hotel until nearly 3 a.m. I heard the door unlock, the soft click of heels on marble, the familiar rhythm of her setting her bag down on the counter without care. She didn't bother being quiet, which told me she assumed I was asleep, or didn't care if I wasn't. I stayed in bed, unmoving, listening. There was a whisper of a laugh, then a second voice, male, low, confidence, David. They were both in the suite. My heart didn't jump, it slowed, the way it does when you're watching something inevitable unfold in real time. I kept my breathing even as I reached for my phone and quietly tapped the voice recorder app. You were amazing today, he said. Helen chuckled. I've always looked good on camera, especially when the ring's not weighing me down. You're not scared Jason noticed? Jason sees what he wants to see, he's too busy pretending we're still a storybook. There was a pause. David again. What if he finds out? Then he finds out, Helen said flatly. He's not going anywhere, he's not built for leaving. They laughed. It wasn't loud, it was worse than loud, it was casual. I stared at the ceiling. The words didn't hurt as much as the ease with which they were said. It wasn't the betrayal, it was how routine it felt for her. After, or a few minutes, I heard the door shut again. I waited 10 seconds, then I rose, slipped on my hoodie, walked into the kitchen, and played the voicemail I had just saved. The audio was clean, crisp, no room for excuses. The next morning, Helen acted like nothing happened. She wore a white satin robe, her hair perfectly waved, holding a green juice like it was a branding opportunity. I booked us a couples massage this afternoon, she said, scrolling through her phone. I poured coffee silently. She didn't look up. You're quiet. Is everything okay? I didn't sleep well. She finally glanced over. That's because you were stressed about the ring. Relax, babe. It was just a piece of metal. I nodded. Sure, just a piece of metal. She paused, sensing something. You're being weird. I turned to her. What would you do if I lied to you? Her expression didn't even flicker. Depends on the lie. If I said I lost your trust, would that be a deal breaker? Helen smiled. It was faint, performed. We all lie a little. That's just survival. That was the moment I knew she wasn't just cheating. She was gone. I didn't reply. I didn't argue. I left her with her smoothie and took a walk. At the end of the pier, I called Margaret. Say it, I said. There was silence on the other end. Then she spoke. You already know. I want to hear it from someone who doesn't lie to me. Margaret's voice was calm. She's using you, Jason, and it's not subtle. The sponsors, the access, the platform, none of that exists without you. I have audio, I told her. I'm not surprised. Should I expose it? You don't need to expose her, Margaret said. She'll do that herself. That afternoon, Helen posted a carousel of beach photos with the caption, My peace, my person, my path. In the last slide, she was holding David's hand, cropped just enough for deniability but clear enough for anyone who knew the context. The comments were filled with hearts. Everyone believed the post was about me. I didn't comment, I didn't like it. I just sent it to Margaret with one line. They think I'm still blind. She replied, let them, for now. The next week, we returned home. Helen acted like the trip had healed us. She booked tastings. She hosted wedding-themed live streams. She called the wedding our fairy tale. David was always around. I stopped asking why. One evening, I walked into the studio Helen had rented for content creation. David was sitting at her desk, editing a clip of them together. He looked up. Yo man, are you good? Where's Helen? She stepped out, picking up dinner. He smirked. You know, she's lucky. Not many guys would tolerate another man this close to their girl. I looked at him. "You're not that close." "Come on," he said, leaning back. "Let's not pretend." I didn't rise to it. I looked at the screen. The video was labeled, "The Dress Rehearsal." "You're recording rehearsals now?" He shrugged. "It's all content." I walked past him, picked up the hard drive sitting beside the monitor and slid it into my pocket. He frowned. "Hey, what are you doing?" "I paid for the equipment," I said. "That include as the footage." "You don't trust her?" "I don't trust you." He stood up. "You're insecure." I smiled. "No, I'm aware." When Helen returned, she acted confused. "Jason, what's wrong?" I handed her the hard drive. "Keep it, but tell him to stay out of my office." She looked between us. "This is ridiculous." "No," I said. "What's ridiculous is thinking I wouldn't notice." That night, she slept in a separate room. I heard her whispering on the phone for hours. The next morning, Margaret walked into my office holding a manila folder. "Financial summaries," she said. "Also, something else." I opened the folder. Bank statements, several large withdrawals, all routed through Helen's business account, all transferred to a consulting firm registered under David's name. "She's paying him?" I asked. "More like funneling. How long?" 3 months. I closed the folder. "Does she know you found this?" "No." "Keep it that way." That evening, Helen asked me to do a brand QA with her on livestream. "It'll calm the rumors," she said. "What rumors?" She hesitated. "People noticed we're a little off. This will help." I agreed. We sat together in front of the camera. The comments rolled in. "You two have a couple goals. When's the honeymoon?" "Jason, blink if she's the boss." Helen smiled at the last one. "He knows who runs things." I smiled too. "I do." Margaret watched from across the room, silent. When the stream ended, Helen leaned over and kissed my cheek. "That wasn't so bad." I looked at her. "Do you think people believe everything they see?" She frowned. "What?" "Never mind." She didn't notice Margaret slip a flash drive into my pocket on my way out. Later that night, I reviewed the files. In addition to the financials, there were messages, screenshots, Helen and David talking about wedding contracts, payment splits, even possible PR angles if I walked away dramatically. They were planning to spin the breakup, to monetize it. They weren't afraid of the collapse, they were counting on it. I sat in my office chair for a long time, the flash drive in one hand, my ring box in the other. The rings were still there, cold, heavy, unworn. I took a photo of the box. Captioned it, "Some endings don't need announcements, they just need clarity." I didn't post it, not yet, but I saved it. Because soon, Helen would find out, I wasn't just the fallback groom. I was the storm she forgot to plan for. The worst part of betrayal isn't the act itself, it's the silence that follows, the stillness, the waiting. In the days that followed, I didn't confront Helen, I didn't scream or demand answers. I didn't send the screenshots to her parents or expose David's name in public. I just lived with the noise inside me. A chest, the kind that comes when you know something has ended, but it hasn't collapsed outward yet. I stopped eating full meals, stopped answering non-work texts. Margaret noticed, of course, she always did. "You look like you haven't slept," she said quietly, handing me tea instead of coffee. "I haven't," I replied. "Sleep feels like a lie." She didn't ask questions. She sat across from me and worked quietly, grounding me in the normalcy I no longer felt at home. Home. That word felt hollow now. Helen was still planning things, floral trials, menu tastings, guest lists. She performed the role of a fiancée flawlessly, except she never touched me anymore. Her affection was hollow, her laughter rehearsed. I watched her play the lead in a story we weren't writing together. Every time she said babe, my stomach tightened. Every time she smiled for a photo beside me, I wondered how many versions of that same smile David had seen. She thought I didn't know. That I was still the passive one, the guy who would swallow discomfort to avoid embarrassment. And maybe for a long time, that had been true. But now? I was observing, tracking, waiting. That made the pain worse. Because now I wasn't just heartbroken, I was complicit. I watched her flirt with him in front of me, daring me to call it what it was. I listened to her laugh too long at his jokes, defend him too quickly when I asked why he was always around. I endured the eye rolls, the gaslighting, the scripted, "you're just imagining it." And through it all, I stayed. Because endings deserved orchestration. One morning, I caught myself staring at the engagement ring I had retrieved from the jeweler. It had been resized after her complaints, polished, perfect. It sat in its box like an artifact, untouched and unwanted. Margaret walked into my office mid-stare. She didn't say anything right away. After a moment, she sat beside me. "Does it hurt more because you still love her, or because you hate that you used to?" I looked at her. "I don't think I love her anymore." She nodded. "That's not an answer." I swallowed. "It hurts because she never stopped smiling through it, like it never mattered." "Do you want to leave?" "Not yet." "Then why stay?" "Because if I don't make her look in the mirror, I'll always wonder if I let her win." Margaret didn't flinch. "You're not the kind of man who needs revenge." "I don't need it," I said, "but I need closure." "And what happens when it's over?" I didn't have an answer. The next evening, I came home to Helen recording herself in the kitchen, doing a fake cooking segment with pre-prepped ingredients. She didn't even notice me walk in. David's voice was coming from her phone speaker, giving her script prompts. I stood behind the camera and watched her stage her life. When she finally turned, she blinked in surprise. "Oh, you're early." I stared at the ring finger, still bare. She noticed. Her voice became a sing-song. "Still upset about the beach thing?" I didn't respond. She rolled her eyes. "Jason, come on," I explained, "you're being dramatic." "Say it again," I said. "Say what?" "Say I'm being dramatic. Say it like you did in that hotel suite." She froze. Her voice dropped. "What are you talking about?" "You and David, the recording." She took a step back. "You were spying on me?" "No, you were loud." She hesitated, then scoffed. "Seriously? You're going to throw away our wedding over a joke?" I tilted my head. "A joke?" "David is he's just someone who understands my world better. He gets the industry. He knows what sells. That's not a crime." I kept my voice low. "You said I'm not built for leaving, that I'm a safety net, that I see what I want to see." Her jaw clenched. "We were joking." I didn't believe her. She knew it. I knew it. The silence between us swelled like a wave about to crash. I walked to the counter and placed the ring box down. "This was supposed to be forever." "It still can be," she whispered. "Not with pity, not with lies." "Jason, I wanted you to want me." She stepped forward. "I do." "No," I said. "You want the life I built, the narrative, the convenience, but not me." Her voice cracked. "That's not true." "Then why does David know more about your schedule than I do? Why does he sit in my office? Why do you always look at him first when you laugh?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I picked up the box again. "You lost the ring on purpose." She didn't deny it. That was the worst part. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching lights flicker in the apartment across the street. In the darkness, everything felt sharper. Real. Margaret called at 2:17 a.m. "I'm awake," I said before she could speak. "So am I," she replied. "I was thinking." About how love isn't always the cure. Sometimes, it's the cause. "I think I'm grieving," I admitted. "But not for her. For who I used to be." She paused. "That's normal. I used to believe in commitment as if it was a solution. It's not. I thought if I loved well enough, she'd stop needing the spotlight. You can't make someone content. That's their responsibility." I nodded, though she couldn't see. "What do I do with all this pain?" "Use it," Margaret said simply. "For what?" "For the ending she never saw coming." The next day, I cleaned out my office drawer. Every receipt, every invoice Helen had filed for business expenses that funded David's rise, I archived them. Then I opened a private folder and started drafting a message. Not to the public, not to her family, to myself. A closure letter, A contract between me and the man I wanted to be again. I wrote, "You didn't fail, you just outgrew her lie." That night, I told Helen we needed to talk. She looked worried. "Jason, I'm sorry." "Don't be," I said. "It's already over." "What is this?" I handed her a document, nothing legal, just a typed statement of withdrawal. No ceremony, no confrontation, just a decision. She read it twice. Then she looked up with glassy eyes. "You don't want to fix it?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I was never the one breaking it." She cried. Not because she lost me, because she lost the version of herself she got to pretend to be with me. I thought walking away would be the climax. That handing Helen that document, that quiet line, "because I was never the one breaking it," would be the end of the performance. The curtain drops, the relief. I was wrong. 3 days after I left, Helen went public. She didn't post a breakup announcement, she posted an engagement photo. One of ours, recycled, cropped, captioned, "Sometimes love needs space to grow, we're stronger than ever." The comments flooded in. "I knew you two would work it out. Ignore the haters, queen. This is what real love looks like." "David who?" I read them all in silence. Margaret barged into my office, phone in hand. "Jason, she's weaponizing your silence." "She doesn't know how to be quiet," I muttered. "She's painting you as the devoted man who forgave her." "She wants to keep the illusion alive," I said. "But why now?" We didn't have to wait long for an answer. That night, I got an email from my legal team. A luxury watch brand Helen had signed a co-deal with was requesting final confirmation for the joint campaign, ads, appearances, press releases. She had used my name, my image, and signed on my behalf 2 weeks ago. I stared at the documents. My forged signature looked perfect. "She faked your consent," Margaret said, reading over my shoulder. "That's fraud. She's desperate. She's a criminal." I forwarded the documents to my lawyer, added a short note, "Terminate, disassociate, begin action." Then I picked up my phone and texted Helen. "Take it down, all of it, every post using my name." She replied seconds later. "You're overreacting. We were a brand, Jason. This is just business." That line hit differently, not "we were in love," not "I'm sorry," just a brand. Margaret watched my jaw clench. "What now?" "I'm going to see her." I didn't tell Margaret the real reason I wanted to visit. I had suspicions, ones that kept tightening in my mind like a belt pulled slowly around the throat, and I needed confirmation. When I arrived at Helen's apartment, she opened the door dressed in loungewear and smug confidence. "I was wondering how long it'd take you to come crawling back," she said. "I'm not crawling," I replied. "I'm cleaning." She frowned. "Cleaning what?" I handed her a printed copy of the forged contract. "You used my name, you faked a business deal, you didn't just lie, you committed fraud." Helen blinked, then shrugged. "So, report me." "I already did." She stiffened. "I'll have your deal pulled within 24 hours. The brand doesn't want scandal, and I just gave them one." "You'll ruin everything," she hissed. "I'm just undoing the lies." She stepped back, trying to regroup. "Fine, you win. You'll get to play the victim while I'm dragged into the headlines." "I didn't ask for headlines," I said. "I asked for honesty." "You want honesty?" she snapped. "Fine, I never loved you the way you loved me. I tried, but I always felt trapped. You were safe, predictable. Margaret saw everything, and you never saw her." I stared. What does Margaret have to do with this? Helen smirked. "Please, don't act blind. She's been in love with you since day one. She hid it well, but I always knew. That's why I kept her away. Not because I was jealous, but because I knew she was the version of love you actually needed." My hands curled into fists, not out of anger, but because somewhere deep down, part of me knew she wasn't entirely wrong. Helen leaned against the counter. "You think I'm the villain?" Margaret was always waiting, always present, always one step away. "Don't kid yourself, she didn't help with the wedding because she wanted to support you. She did it because she hoped I'd fall, so she could catch what was left." I didn't reply. "You still don't believe it, do you?" I spoke softly. "It doesn't matter what Margaret feels, she never crossed a line." That's what makes her smarter than me, Helen said. She waited while I wasted. I turned to leave, but she called after me. I wasn't going to tell you this, but David recorded your call with Margaret last week, when you said I was gone, when you told her about the flash drive. I froze. What? Helen smiled. He has it saved. He's threatening to leak it if you expose us. I turned slowly. That's blackmail. She raised both hands. It wasn't my idea. But you were letting him. She looked away. Now the second twist was clear. David didn't just want Helen, he wanted leverage. He knew my reputation, my business partnerships, my position. A leaked private call where I admitted to collecting evidence, framing closure, and plotting exposure. That could be spun into narrative manipulation, emotional exploitation, corporate damage control. I was holding the truth, but he had the power to distort it. I walked out without another word. Back at my office, I sat in the dark, laptop open, hand still. Margaret knocked once, then entered. You were right, I said. About what? Helen and David aren't hiding anymore, they're attacking. Margaret took a seat. What happened? They have the call, the one where I told you about the files. Her lips tightened. How? David recorded it. Her breath caught. So what now? I stared at the screen. Now we let him leak it. Jason. I'm not afraid of the truth, I said. Let them play dirty, I'll stay clean. Margaret looked at me. You can't beat fire with silence. I'm not planning to. She waited. I clicked open a folder labeled Final Assets. Inside were every financial record, signed NDA, and photo David thought I didn't have. None of it was stolen. All of it is legal, backed up, dated, unedited. I built this quietly, I said, while they built noise. Margaret smiled faintly. You're not the storm, Jason. No, I said, I'm the architect. And I had just finished the foundation. The press conference wasn't for them. It wasn't for the wedding sponsors, it wasn't for my shareholders, it wasn't even for Helen. It was for me, for closure, for truth. Margaret stood beside me at the lobby entrance of my corporate building. Cameras were already setting up, guests were arriving. News had broken that morning that David was releasing evidence of my manipulation, audio files, conversations, accusations that I had plotted Helen's downfall for content and revenge. The internet had exploded. Hashtags, speculation. Everyone picked a side before I said a word. Are you sure you want to do this? Margaret asked. I nodded. I'm done staying silent while liars speak. I stepped forward. Across the street, I saw Helen and David standing together. They looked smug, but tense. Helen was wearing white again, like she always did when she wanted to reclaim innocence. David stood close to her, phone in hand, no doubt ready to stream his version live. The lights flipped on. I walked to the podium and faced the crowd. Good morning, I began. I wasn't going to speak publicly, I didn't want this to become a performance, but I've realized, when people drag your name through mud and profit from it, silence becomes complicity. The flashes began. I was engaged to Helen for 5 years, I supported her dreams, funded her business, and trusted her to build a life beside me. In return, she staged a persona, fed off perception, and when truth didn't align with her image, she crafted lies. A murmur. This morning, her partner David released a private recording of a conversation between me and my operations director, Margaret. Margaret stayed perfectly still, composed. In that recording, I speak about discovering evidence of financial fraud, emotional manipulation, and my plan to walk away. I said I wanted closure. I said I wanted Helen to see herself for who she had become. A few reporters raised their hands. I ignored them. They're spinning that as manipulation. But I ask you this, when you discover betrayal, do you not seek understanding? When you're lied to for years, do you not want clarity? I didn't orchestrate Helen's downfall, I simply stopped protecting her from the truth. Gasps, whispers. I tapped the folder on the podium. Here are signed records of forged contracts, unauthorized use of my name, and proof that David was being paid under the table from my business assets. I held it up. These are not edited, not doctored. Every one of them is verified and time-stamped. Then I turned toward the side doors. And since this isn't just about me, I invited someone else today. A hush fell. The doors opened. Helen stepped through. Alone. David wasn't beside her now. Her face was paler than before, lips pressed tight. She hadn't expected this. Margaret handed her a mic. Helen took it, but said nothing for a long moment. The crowd waited. She finally spoke. Jason and I were supposed to get married, that much is true. No one moved. I made mistakes, she continued. I thought I could build a life by curating it. I thought love could survive performance. I was wrong. Someone in the audience asked, "Did you forge the documents?" She didn't answer. Another called, "Did you cheat?" Still silent. I stepped forward. This isn't for punishment, it's for the truth. All I wanted was a partner, not a production. Helen's eyes filled with something unfamiliar, not regret, not guilt, fear. "He knows everything," she whispered, turning toward me. "You were always watching, weren't you?" I was hoping you'd stop. She handed the mic back and walked out. No apology, no denial, just defeat. The moment she left the room, I turned back to the press. I will not be pursuing criminal charges, not because I'm forgiving, but because some lessons are heavier when carried outside of prison. I closed the folder. We won't be issuing further statements, let this serve as the last chapter. As I stepped away from the podium, David shouted from the back of the room. "You think you won? You think walking away makes you a hero?" I paused, then I faced him. "No, I don't need to be the hero, but I'm no longer your storyline." Security moved toward him, he backed off. Margaret stepped beside me as we exited the room. "Are you okay?" she asked. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. For the first time in a long time, yeah. We walked past the crowd, past the lights, past the whispers. Out into the sun. That evening, I stood by the windows of my office, looking out at the city skyline. It felt different now, cleaner, quieter. Like I had finally shut a window that had been banging in the wind for years. Margaret entered with 2 glasses of wine. "Red or white?" she asked. "Doesn't matter," I said, taking one. "They both taste like freedom tonight." She smiled. "You handled that with more grace than anyone else would have." "I didn't want revenge," I said. "I just didn't want to keep pretending." She sat beside me on the couch. "Do you ever think about what could have happened? If Helen had never lied?" I nodded. "Sometimes. But then I remind myself, truth doesn't fear being seen. Love doesn't need an audience." Margaret's voice was softer now. "And what about us?" I turned to her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if you hadn't met her first." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I whispered, "I would have fallen for you quietly, permanently." She looked down. I waited. "I know." Silence again. But this time, it was warm. "I'm not ready," I admitted, "not yet, but I want you in my life, without lies, without roles." She nodded. "Then let's just be real." I smiled. "That's all I've ever wanted." Later that night, Helen posted one final video. Alone, crying, sitting in her car, telling her followers, "I didn't know how to love someone who didn't need fixing." The comments were mixed, some defended her, some attacked, most just moved on. Because when the lights fade, so do the lies. I turned off my phone, placed the ring box in a drawer, and locked it. Not to preserve what was lost, but to remind myself what I'd never settle for again. 3 months later, Helen stood in front of a cracked mirror inside a rented condo overlooking a grey parking lot. Her reflection didn't shine anymore. The influencer deals were gone. Her last brand terminated her contract after quietly citing reputation misalignment. David had vanished a week after the press conference, deleting every post he'd ever made with her and blocking her across platforms. She called him once. The number was disconnected. That was when she realized she had never really had him either. He hadn't loved her, he'd loved the leverage she gave him, the access, the spotlight. When the curtain fell, he exited stage left, no encore. Helen tried damage control. She tried posting a redemption arc video, makeup free, tears rolling, soft piano music underneath. It barely crossed 10K views. The comments were ruthless this time. You betrayed a good man and still want sympathy? This isn't healing, this is strategy. Where's David now? Jason upgraded to peace. She turned off the comments, then deleted the post, then deleted the app. Helen had always counted on one thing: optics. She never thought truth would be louder than aesthetics. Meanwhile, Jason's company quietly launched a new initiative, Crescent Integrity, a non-profit division aimed at supporting whistleblowers and small businesses defrauded by influencer partnerships. Its tagline, "Real builds last." The board unanimously approved the campaign, investors loved it, clients praised it. His reputation, once hijacked by rumors and gossip, was now ironclad, unshakable. But Jason didn't do interviews, he didn't ride the wave of public sympathy, he simply worked. Margaret remained by his side, not as a rebound, not as a romantic safety net, but as his trusted voice, his reality check, his first line of defense against performance disguised as love. One evening, after a company gala, Margaret handed him a sealed envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Something you should see," she replied. Inside was a letter, handwritten. Unfolded, it revealed a familiar looping script. Helen. Jason, I don't expect you to read this, but I need to write it anyway. You were always more patient than I deserved. I thought I was building a brand, but I was really destroying the only thing that made me human. I don't miss your money, or the stability, I miss the silence you gave me, the safety I never appreciated. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just recognition that I know now, losing you wasn't a plot twist. It was justice. H. Jason folded the letter once, then again, and slid it into his desk drawer without a word. Margaret didn't ask what it said. She just looked at him and said, "You look lighter." He nodded. "I finally am." That weekend, Margaret and Jason traveled out of the city. No meetings, no phones, just cliffs, wind, and quiet. They stopped by the very beach where everything had unraveled months ago. It was quieter now, emptier, as if the waves themselves had cleared away the memory of what once stained the shore. Jason stood at the edge of the water, holding something in his palm. The ring. The original engagement ring Helen had lost. Margaret looked at it, surprised. "I thought it was gone." Jason nodded. "It was, but I came back after everything, just to check. It was buried beneath the rocks, still in the sand." Margaret said nothing. Jason stared at it one last time. It's strange. For years, this symbolized hope. Then it became a disappointment. Then betrayal. But now? He looked up at the sky. It's just metal again. He threw it. The ring arced through the air, caught the sunlight, and vanished into the sea like a wound finally healing shut. Margaret stood beside him, eyes closed, breathing in the salt. They didn't speak for a long time. Because peace doesn't always arrive with words. Sometimes it arrives in the silence after you've said all there is to say, and lived through all that, tried to break you. That night, Helen scrolled through her messages. Most were old threads, no replies, just seen marks, a ghost of the popularity she used to bathe in. She opened her banking app. Her savings were running low, the apartment lease was nearing expiration. She thought about calling Jason, then stopped, then typed the number, then deleted it. She cried. Not because she lost him, but because now she understood that loyalty isn't loud, it's consistent, and when it's gone, no amount of public begging brings it back. The next day, she applied for a job at a boutique agency that didn't know her past. She signed the contract quietly, no post, no announcement. Her era of performance was over. Jason never posted about her again, never referenced the betrayal in any interview, partnership, or speech. Because he didn't need to. His revenge wasn't in shouting, it was in surviving, in thriving, in showing the world that walking away isn't weakness, it's power, exercised in silence. At the next annual board meeting, Margaret stood beside him as they reviewed a new global partnership deal. The executive across the table smiled. "You two work well together. Married?" Jason glanced at Margaret, then chuckled. "Not yet." Margaret smiled. But neither of them denied the future. Because now, every step forward was made in truth. No ring needed, no audience watching. Just two people who had seen the worst and refused to become it. In the final chapter of Helen's story, she sat on a cold bench one night, watching a younger couple take selfies in the streetlight. The girl was wearing a ring. The boy looked at her like she mattered more than the lens. Helen smiled sadly, not out of envy, but recognition. That was what she once had, and never saw. And now, she didn't hate Jason for leaving, she hated herself for being the reason he had to.